Okay, we're here today with our newest entry into the Arizona drag racing legends, Albert Eshenbaugh. Albert's also one of the inaugural Arizona Hall of Fame members, drag racing Hall of Fame members, and quite a great representative for Arizona in our motorsports and the passion we have for drag racing, and even Bonneville racing. He's basically done it all. He's a car guy from the word go. So, Albert, when did you arrive in Arizona?
Well, I was born in West Virginia, in a small town, 3,000 people. And my first speed experience, I'll start from the very beginning, was I was about 5 probably. And my sister and I were into everything. She was 4 years older than I was. And I found an old baby buggy, and we lived on a very steep hill. The hill went up, and then our house, and then it went way up. And I took the wheels and the bottom carriage off of that, and I used to roll down the hill. Well, I found out if I loosened up all the wheels and everything, I could actually steer it with my body. Well, then I found an old nail keg, and I fastened that with wire onto the wheels, and I'd ride that down, sitting on the nail keg. Well, that was cool because I had somewhere to sit, and I got it where it was more steerable. So one morning I decided I was going to go to the top of the hill. And also my sister and I, and her being older, she turned me on to matches. We could make fire.
Oh, speed and fire.
So I got to the top of the hill, stuck old grass and stuff in the nail keg, and lit it on fire. Well, the open end was to the back. Well, it would barely burn. It was green, and so I thought, well, I can't make that work. So I get on the thing and said, here we go. So I went down the hill. Well, the air blowing in the end of the keg, and it was kind of loose and split, fired up the burner. And when I came by the house, my mom was looking out the kitchen window, and she thought it was a jet. And it felt like I was probably almost subsonic. I went by there. Well, she jumped in the car, of course she knew it was me, and fired it up and went down to see what was left of me. Well, it was really fast, and it was burning my legs. And there was a cross street at the end of that hill, and it dead-ended. And I hit the curb, split my chin open, and that was my first deal with speed. And I still remember that like I just did it.
How old were you then?
I was 5.
Oh my goodness.
And then
your sister was quite the inspiration, huh?
Yeah, my sister was cheering me on. So then we moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, and my dad worked on the Manhattan project.
Okay.
And we were there till the war ended. Came back to Mannington, West Virginia, and moved to Phoenix. And I had go-karts, and I was in the deal with Ted when we raced go-karts.
Ted Olson.
And that was probably 54. And we raced a little 20th of a mile track behind this church. And that's where I first met Ted. And then we fooled around with the racing go-karts, and then we decided we'd go drag racing. We knew about J.R. Bloom lived just catty corner from where Ted did. And we bought a 34 Ford from his brother-in-law, Clell Bloom, and, or no, his name wasn't Bloom. His first name was Clell. Anyway, we towed that thing to Perryville drag strip with a rope. And my mom's had a 51 Pontiac. And I towed Ted with a rope all the way. And it's got to be 30 miles, 40 miles out there from my house. We lived at 28th Street in Camelback.
No freeways then?
Well, you went down to Van Buren and then out Van Buren.
That was the highway. That was with US 60 or whatever back then, or something like that, or that was the main highway.
Van Buren went to dirt along somewhere out that way. Anyway, and it ran actually pretty good. It ran 104 on gasoline, and we won our class. So then we went, I built a 39 Chevy with a Chevy V8 in it, and I raced that in C gas at Perryville. And then Ted and I got the idea we'd build a dragster. So with a little help from several friends and Joe Dillon, and he was older than I was, but he worked at machine shop, and he was a great friend to have because he could do all the machining. So we built this dragster, and it was really nice. We had the body professionally built, and we had all of our money went into that dragster. And Carl Grimes helped me with the engine and introduced me to Ed Eskandarian, and then Ed helped me with the motor, cams, and we had a lot of help back then. And we used a Packard transmission because it was close ratio. And I knew kind of about gearing and ratios. We had a quick change in it, but it was pretty state-of-the-art back then. And we were in that, and we'd take turns driving it. You know, it's your turn, my turn. And we ran B-gas dragster, and to my knowledge, we were never beat in the class. We made it to the finals a lot of times, and would run top eliminator with Ivo or whoever. But and we did win a couple of meets, but most of the time with the bigger cars, bigger motors would beat us.
So was the format you'd run your class first?
Yeah.
And the class winner would go into the top eliminator?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we went to Oklahoma City in '58, and actually that, got a little ahead of myself. In '58, Ted and I hadn't finished the car yet, but I had the motor, and I put it in a guy's car. Arnold Cuevas was his name, who worked for Carl Grimes. And he had a dragster that Boyd Huff built. And we took that to Oklahoma City and won the class. And then we ran the B-gas dragster runs Comp Coupe. And we beat the Comp Coupe. And then we run the C dragster run off with him and beat the C dragster. So it left Sharon Hopper and myself. And we were runner-up at Indy, or at Oklahoma City.
That's quite the accomplishment.
Yeah, and I was 18 years old, so that was my start to drag racing. And also, interesting story, the car was a little light. So when we weighed it in, and I was always thinking, and I knew it was going to be light, and we were thinking, well, how are we going to do? So we pulled the car, and we were pulling it with a rope. And I thought, it was only about 10, 15 pounds light. So I hooked a chain onto the car. We pulled it up there with the chain, left the chain wrapped around the axle and weighed the car. Oh yeah.
They never looked at the chain.
You're good to go. So I always had figuring stuff out, how to do it. But then we came back to Phoenix and Ted and I ran that car probably a year and a half with different engines in it. And, we've had Jimmy Stewart's 500 cubic inch Oldsmobile in it, and Teddy Meredith wanted to drive it, so we took it to Long Beach, and he run down a light pole at Long Beach. And so that was about the end of the Eshenbaugh Olson drag racing thing. He went back to school, and I went to school at Phoenix College, and was into aviation. And I took aviation, got married. My wife was interested in aviation. We both got a license. We bought an airplane, sold it, bought another airplane, and she was a very good pilot, especially on weather and technical stuff. But I lived through the flying thing, but I never liked, the only thing I liked to do was aerobatics. I just couldn't see being an airline pilot. It just didn't interest me. So I just, all that money and time, and I just let it go. Kind of a foolish thing, but
You followed your passion, though.
yeah, I just, and I still fly a little bit, but I'm just not really interested in it. So then Larry and I drag raced. He was looking for somebody to drive his car, and we bought a new 413 Chrysler in '59.
That was the wedge motor?
The wedge motor, because it looked like it was a lot better deal than, which it turns out it was when they made heads for it. But
so that was the beginning of the Steininger and Eshenbaugh team.
yeah, and when we tried putting nitro, a lot of nitro in the 413, it'd just pop and bang and never ran any good. The wedge motor just wouldn't do it. So then we put a 354 Chrysler in it, and I still remember the run at Mel Larson's, because we ran Fred Dobney, and it rained out the week before, and Fred Dobney and myself were going to run for top eliminator. Well, that week is when we put the Hemi in. So we went out there to run, and Fred says, well, that's not fair. You got the Hemi in now, and you had to, well, there was no rules against anything like that. So we made a qualifying run, pitched the blower belt off about half track, well, about 3/4 track, and it ran quicker and faster than the 413 had ever ran. So I thought, wow, this is going to be nice. So we beat Dobney, and that was the beginning of the Hemi deal. And we ran the 354 for a little while, and then switched to 392s, and then we had 1/2-inch cranks in them that made them 454. But anyway, Larry and I were pretty successful. I took the car back east a couple of summers and stayed at one of my grandmother's old houses in Mannington. And it was right up in the panhandle of West Virginia, about 100 miles from Pittsburgh. And I could race every weekend in the summer and get $500 show-up money for match racing. And I could drive 50 to 100 miles and be at a different drag strip every weekend. There was drag strips all over back there. So I did that for a couple of years, and I ran as good as anybody back then. But I didn't like the traveling. I just couldn't do it. I remember I took off from Phoenix and went down to Florida to run a match race. Hell, it took 4 days and 4 or 5 tires, and you know, it was awful. And I remember Garlits used to build a new car and load it on a trailer and take it to Long Beach. And I couldn't do that. I just... So Larry and I, in about 65, we kind of gave it up. And then I bought a motorcycle shop, or started a motorcycle shop, Kawasaki dealership. And I was in that quite a few years. And then I started another shop in Mesa, Kawasaki, Husqvarna dealership. And then I sold both of those and just lived on the money. And I'd gotten divorced from my first wife, got remarried, had a little girl, Allison, got divorced, and then I married my first wife's cousin, but she was a good bit younger. But anyway, and that's a whole other story. There's enough to write a book.
Yeah. You know you've had a good life when you write a book.
Yeah.
And everything that you would put it to be the truth, and people would say that's fiction.
Yeah.
You know you've had a good life.
Yeah. Yeah. It would seem like fiction, some of it.
Right.
Anyway, you know, and I drove various cars, drag racing. They called him Joe the Jet from Sanford, Maine.
Okay.
And I drove his car for a while, and Rod Stuckey was the crew chief, and we did well with that. And then I got into motorcycles, but I was 30 years old by then, and found out, you know, I'm just almost too old to ride motocross. And then so I tried desert racing and did well. But, you know, I was getting hurt too much. When you run up front, you pay your dues.
Yeah. You're finding all the holes before everybody else does.
So then I got into off-road racing. And also a guy by the name of Bob Shepard came to me in '85. And he said, you know, I'd like to off-road race, and he had a little bit, and he was a great motorcycle rider. So I built a car in my garage. I had a shop. I didn't work for anybody most of my life. I had a shop in the back of my house, and I built an off-road car, state of the art, because Shepard was inherited from his grandparents the Purex Bleach Corporation.
Okay.
So he had millions. So I built this car, and money was no object. And my wife was pregnant at the time and just ready to have the baby. And the season started in the Parker 400. So we tested the car by driving it up and down the alley. He threw it on a trailer and went to Parker. And And we won the championship that year. In fact, we won almost every race. But he called me after the Parker race and he said, we won the whole thing overall. And I said, no, really, how did you do? He said, we won the whole thing overall. I said, nah, really, how'd you do? And he said, if you ask me that one more time, I'm hanging up. So anyway, he won the thing. He said he came in, sat in the lawn chair and drank 3 beers before second place came in. And that's a fact.
That far ahead of everybody.
We just killed him that year. So, and Bob later on in the trophy trucks won the championship in about 2002 or 3 or 4, somewhere along there. So he was a great driver and had a lot of money.
The trophy trucks require that.
The trophy trucks, he said he spent out of pocket that year over $1 million. But in money contingencies and when he sold all the stuff at the end of the year, he got a lot of that $1 million back. I mean, he makes it sound like he spent $1 million, but he didn't.
He had good parts. People wanted to buy it.
Yeah. So then I got into Bonneville.
So how did you get into Bonneville? What triggered you to want to do Bonneville? What was your...
Well, I'd never been there. And
did you go first to see it, or
yeah.
did you build the car first?
Bill and I, the guy I worked for at the cabinet company, and that's when I was building a bus for him, a custom bus, which that's a whole nother story. One time in 2000, I said, you know, we ought to go to Bonneville. Oh, okay, I'd never been there. So we went up there, watched it, loved it, came back and bought a car from a guy named Jerry McKenzie, had a Roadster. And we ran it in '02, I think, first time, or '03, somewhere along there. But it's a big learning curve up there. In my mind, I associate him with drag racing, and you don't want to do that. So it cost us a few years, and finally, when we did set the record in D fuel Roadster, we put 10 miles an hour on the record. And
how fast was that? Do you remember?
Yeah, 243 was it.
So you got the red hat on top of that?
Yeah, I got a red hat, and then I came back in October to the Bonneville, the second race they have, and I took one piston and rod out and put a bob weight on the crank to balance it so it could run on 7 cylinders. And that just made the E class. And coincidentally, the D and E are the closest split of all the classes. And I got to looking at that one day. Well, if I was at the top of the class and took one piston out, it wasn't enough. But my engine was 295 inch and the limit is 307. So by taking one piston out, I made the class. So I ran a record in that class and put 10 miles an hour on it. And then we went back a lot and went back blown. And anyway, then Ted and I got the wild idea we'd build because he was along with me all the time, build a Lakester. And I built a half a Chrysler, had an inline crank made for it so that the firing order would be right, 2 pistons up, 2 down, and ran a half a Chrysler. And we went to El Mirage and we put 13 miles an hour on the record over there. 201 and we run 214
On the dry lake.
on the dry lakes, and that's, you know, on dirt, that's fast.
Is there a big difference in traction between the salt and the dirt?
Yeah, there's way more traction on the dirt. You'll run it in 1.33 miles about the same speed you're running 2 miles at Bonneville.
Okay.
Just from traction. And the half a Chrysler was kind of the end of the. We went to Bonneville a couple of times after that, and then we put a V8 back in it, but never could get it really on the record. Close, but you know, all them records are tough at Bonneville. This guy's been bumping them up for years. I mean,
something like George Poteet's been over 400 miles an hour more than everybody else combined at the track or something like that. Yeah, that's a great story about Bonneville. What's your fastest you've gone? You went Salt Flats.
The fastest I ever been at Bonneville was 2:53 in the Roadster. And back to the dry lakes, when we were running the Roadster, at the time, and it's been bumped up since then, I had the fastest Roadster unblown, regardless of engine size, of anybody had ever ran. I ran 2:33 over there one day, and that was faster than any Roadster had ever run.
So when you do something like that, and you just come out and you just blow the record away, do they scrutinize your car a lot? Do they take a close look at it, or do they just?
Oh yeah, yeah, they look at it pretty close. Yeah, they.
So you can't get away with hanging a tow chain on it. You just,
no, they Bonneville guys are. It's kind of a good old boys network, and if you don't have a California zip code, they're pretty rough.
So
on
the
you.
question I love to ask: did you get a kick out of beating the California guys or being better than?
Yeah, you know, I told them I don't give a damn how they do it in California. We'll do it our way.
We have a pretty good heritage of racers here in Arizona.
Yeah. So, and I'm building a new Roadster, a new chassis, same body, right now. In fact, I was working on it this morning with a Donovan block, a Webster head, and the 4-banger crank and all. But I'm beefed it up with a Donovan because the block, them cast iron blocks, and running 100% nitro, they only last, you know, 3 or 4 runs, and the cylinders are barrel shaped. They just doesn't work. So I got a good block, and we're going to go back there, and my boy's going to drive it. And
what an honor! That's awesome.
The record in that class in a 4-banger on fuel unblown is 196, and it should run 210. You know, everything has to be lined up at Bonneville. The weather, the density, altitude, the track condition, not too wet, not too dry. There's so many things that have to be right.
So if this all comes together, he should get himself a red hat.
Yeah. Yeah, we should be able to get a red hat.
I have a friend who got his this last year, and he's done a lot of things in racing, but that's his biggest pride. He wears it all the time, so you know, does not take it off.
It's tough.
That's the 200 mile an hour. If our viewers that you go 200 mile an hour club, you get the red hat. That's quite a feat.
Yeah, and it's like I said, that a lot of them records, not all of them, but a lot of them are up there, and it you know, costs a lot of money to go to Bonneville. Hell, just towing the thing up there and back costs you $2,000 in diesel fuel.
But that's your passion. That's what's gotten you down the road.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm 81 now, so I can only do this few more years.
You can do it till you can no longer do it, but you what's the saying? You feel the need for speed, right?
Yeah, I just, you know, I've never done much else except nonsense.
Well, I would describe it. Maybe you're not done much, but you've done a whole lot. You have a really rich history of racing, drag racing, Bonneville racing, the things that you did, lake racing. You know, we're really proud of all our people from Arizona and what you've done and how you've represented us. And is there anybody you want to say that along the way that inspired you? That who was the guy that really got you off your butt to really want to do it, or who pissed you off enough to make you do it?
You know, I never had much guidance. My dad died when I was 14, and I kind of did everything on my own. But I always knew if you don't know or can't do it, find somebody that knows and can do it and talk them into doing it, or pick their brain. And so I've always had that understanding that I didn't know everything.
So you didn't know everything, but you knew well enough to ask the questions.
Yep, I just asked a question, and you know, I've left a lot out. The interview would be a little boring if I went, or
that'd be that book again that would seem like a fiction instead of being the truth. But you've got such a great life. I mean, you've done things that people dream about doing.
Oh yeah, I've done stuff that people only dream about. They have no idea what my life's been like.
It's pretty awesome, Albert. We really thank you for being here. Thank you for, number one, establishing the Arizona Drag Racing Hall of Fame. You're a key member getting that going and keeping it going, and we appreciate all your efforts there. And then this being an Arizona drag racing legend, that's somebody with our Arizona pride that we're so happy that you're a part of that as well. And we thank you for your time today. Thank you so much.
Well, Red Greth and I started that Arizona Drag Racing Hall of Fame.
What a sweetheart.
And he was the top shelf. I mean, I talked to him. I talked to him the day before he had passed away, and I asked him, and I didn't even know he was sick, and he never told anybody.
That's what I'd heard.
And I asked him, I said, "How you doing?" "Oh, I'm fine." And I used to call him, or he called me, every week. We'd talk. And the day before he died, I talked to him, and he acted like there was nothing wrong.
I've had the honor to do the same interview with him this past year. I'll never forget it.
Yeah, what a guy. I mean, he was top shelf.
Amen to that. We thank you for being you, and go do what you do, and go get that red hat for your son. Okay?
Yep, we'll give her a try.
Okay, Albert. Thank you very much.
You bet.